because we're kind of at this point in history now where we're about to see a phenomenal change of human society.
Mm-hmm.
Now, any change that comes up for human beings tends to be fear-based if they aren't aware. So, of course, they fear their livelihood, their jobs, the unknown taking over. They go to worst case scenarios. I want to sort of cover this from a spiritual perspective and to see how we can collaborate the inevitable because it's coming regardless if we like it or not. It's already
Right.
here. How we collaborate
So,
and work with that, particularly for younger people now that are leaving school, because in the past there was a predictable, let's say, trajectory. That's all changing.
hmm
And this
yeah.
brings a lot of ethical issues like human value.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, if machine learning and certainly if technology well surpasses the human or part of the human intelligence, how we can work with it because it's coming nonetheless.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. And I think so. What I'm hearing is almost a concern with what you said was almost maybe like a fear-based, more contracted way of living, a more contracted experience. And then if we, layer that fear-based experience onto AI, then I
Yes.
guess concern with what will happen as a result.
And if we look at history, we've been here before in every industrial age, with the last industrial age, when human beings moved from agriculture into more organized societies, there was always this fear of the unknown, fear of change. Actually, one of my main observations has always been human beings love change, but human beings tend to not like to change.
Mm. hmm Yeah. It's like this restlessness, but
Mm.
I don't really want to change. It's like you kind of can't win. But but yeah, no, I hear you, and I think it is a recurring theme in human history is this dramatic, I mean, life-changing, reality-changing growth, evolution, technological advancement. This is the unknown. And most people have a pretty um kind of fear-based relationship to the unknown, if we want to use that term, where we don't know what's going to happen, but the mind will habitually and naturally go to worst case scenario. And that's just human nature, I think. I think there's an evolutionary reason for that, but realizing that we can't go back. Some people be like, "Oh, just scrap the technology and let's just be farmers again." It's like that's not gonna happen. I'm sorry, we're moving into unprecedented territory right now. And I think it's a really important question to really examine these pretty potentially scary subjects, which is, what is AI going to look like? How is it going to operate? What kind of mind is it replicating? Knowing that, the human mind right now, the modern man's mind, for the most part, is, let's say, very different than a Tibetan monk's mind. And AI is picking up all of it. You know what I mean? It's picking up a lot of, this fear-based reality and then projecting that. So I hear almost a exigence, a necessity in maybe inputting something that is less contracted, more open, more omniscient maybe into AI. And something I see in that too, I've heard theories about this, that given enough information, if AI just accumulates enough, and has enough time to sift through information, how it plays out, how global events pan out, then there will be a certain level of omniscience in this artificial intelligence. And then, yeah, it could be good, it could be bad, we don't know. That's kind of the unknown territory that we're sitting in right now.
Mm. Yeah, these great points. And you're right, as we are asking these questions, and not everybody, I mean, there's a lot of people that I hear communicate online and they have perspectives to add to the conversation. Do you get this sense that there'll be some kind of a split, even within the spiritual community, between those that are saying we're human only, we're not embracing the technology,
Mhm.
we're going to stay pure, like almost like human purists, and then
Yeah,
those of us that are perhaps like you and I that are more entrepreneurial, that do embrace whatever technology is available to just get things done quicker and easier, to move with the momentum of society, because we're here to, I don't know about you, but I'm here to serve people.
yeah,
Do
likewise.
you get that there'll be some kind of a split and a division coming?
Yeah. Um, I don't see why not, but it's almost like this it would probably be like similar to the split between those who use smartphones and don't. At this
Yes.
point, it seems kind of like you can't compete in the open market if you don't have a smartphone. What are you getting paged and you're calling on the flip phone? Like it's just
Mm.
clearly not as I mean convenient, doesn't, waste quite a bit of time. Like, yeah, so I feel like it's almost I mean, it would be a dramatic split if there was one. It would be like people again resorting to like a Mennonite Amish lifestyle where you're just
Yes, let's have
farming,
our
you're
own
living.
spiritual communities. Let's demonize the technology. We're going 100% human here, and maybe trying to live in communities in places like Bali and
Yeah.
places like Thailand. I
Mhm.
kind of, I'm so fascinated to see how, like you said before, human consciousness works and how we
Right.
tend to react differently to a changing landscape in which we live.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, there's no wrong answers. I think with the whole AI development, there will be, how do I put this? There will be casualties, let's put it like that. And I don't know what that'll look like, but there will be some sort of fallout as far as when the human race collectively is learning something new, there's gonna be some trial and error,
Oh,
inevitably.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's the thing. Do we stick our heels in the ground and say, no, we're not doing this? Because, I mean, in my opinion, what kind of mind is that? Because, like, at the end of the day, if something is possible, human beings will make it so out of raw curiosity. If we can do it, we're going to.
And it's the
Like,
inevitable of the evolutionary process, right? Is
right.
things are ever evolving and changing. In fact, the moment something either in nature or within us as a species stops the growth cycle, it's in the process
Mm,
of withering and decaying. It's in the process of what we refer to as death. And so the very
exactly.
nature of existence is growth, expansion, evolution. From a soul's perspective, a lot of people in spirituality talk
Yeah.
about the soul evolving and growing through experience.
Death and rebirth. And
Yes.
that's what we have to understand. Something is dying. And there's a lot of apprehension. There's a lot of, again, the unknown. It's like your body is dying. That's this culture at a macro level. We're not sure where it's gonna go. We know we can't go back. We're just going forward, and it's scary. And it's interesting. I think we could see this as kind of like a microcosm of our own relationship to death at, the physical level. How do we relate to the end of things and the beginning of something new? what is our relationship to that? And if we again stick our heels in the dirt and resist, just what's the outcome? Like, can we actually stop this rising tide? In my opinion, no. It's more about, again, damage mitigation, as well as exploring the options. How do we hold people accountable? How do we hold AI accountable? These are, the questions that have to be asked instead of metaphorically putting our head in the dirt and just saying, oh, it's not for me, and we're just going to
Yes.
live this more purist lifestyle. Again, no right or wrong, because who knows? Maybe AI kills everybody, and those people are the only ones that survive. I mean, that we really don't know, and that's like part of the unknown that we're stepping into right now. But
And isn't that the process of what we all inevitably face as a human species? Is we all have this built into our very core, the fact that we will die. Everyone listening to this, probably in about 100 years' time or more, depending on lifespans, whether they're increased, will be dead in about 100 or so years' time. And then
yeah,
they'll be making way for a whole new set of human beings. And what
wow.
is that like to really, because we often run from the concept of death because we don't understand it necessarily. We can't analyze it with our analytical mind.
Exactly. I mean, I could talk about this all day. I think our fear of death, collectively, that conditioned fear of death, is a thorn in the side of the human mind right now. And again, there's no reason that we can't pull this thorn out. Look at everything that has come before us. It has lived and it has died. Is there any problem in there? Or do we project a problem with it?
Yeah.
And thus it manifests as such. And in my own experience, if we look death in the eyes, if we spend enough time meditating with it, sitting in stillness, with this knowing that, hey, we're gonna die. Everything that we know is gonna die. These trees, these mountains will turn to dust someday. How does
Mm,
that feel? And
mm,
for me, moving through these phases of grief, of really accepting that, of realizing, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. I know this is going to be dust sooner rather than later.
mm,
And letting myself cry, letting myself be brought to my knees in recognition that I'm going to lose everything I love, including this.
mm,
And through that experience, we can release this fear of death. We can look it in the eye and say, hey, that's okay. The unknown is coming, and that's okay. I have faith.
mm.
And again, on the other end of that, too, if we make it through that grief, maybe we can see more clearly what we actually are. Because were we ever actually just this mind and body?
Yes, yes. Well, that's a great question to ask because who is the I that is perceiving experience?
Right.
Right? Is
Right.
Benjamin a collection of memories and thoughts and judgments and a physical meat suit that's a particular age that's going through the aging process, that
Mhm.
has an identity, that is a nationality, or is the I something greater than that? Is that the
Mm.
experience and there's someone that is experiencing
Yeah.
Benjamin?
Yeah. Yeah. There's many layers to examine this through. My favorite is the Buddhist lens, as you know. So the whole
Yes.
notion of shunyata, which is emptiness. And along
Now,
with
can you
emptiness,
define for people what that means? Because I know people that come from more of a Christian background will see
yeah.
emptiness as in a judgmental way. They
Mhm.
say,
Like
well, we should be full of God or the Holy Spirit, which they
Mhm.
often will say, not empty of it. Can you define what emptiness actually means from your perspective?
Absolutely, yeah. So emptiness is one term for it. I've also heard shunyata be translated as boundlessness. So
Mm,
it's kind of like infinity and zero. It could be everything and it's also none of it. So that's a kind of enigmatic way to describe it.
yeah.
But how
Yeah.
I would describe it more logically is that our minds, us, the mind at a deeper level than our conscious awareness is constructing experience. There is no experience that can exist beyond our mind, actually. This is the X factor, always, and again, I mean deep mind, not just thoughts, not just conscious mind. So, emptiness is a recognition that there is no one way that you are. There is no one way that the world is. There is no one way that a thing is. Calling this a water bottle is actually empty. So we have this label for this thing, and that's very functional. But we could break it down into this is metal, this is covered in stickers, this is plastic. And what is plastic? Did it come from a tree? Is it petroleum? Like, what even is that? So if we follow this deep enough, like, what even is this thing? And realizing that the notion of this being a water bottle is a fabricated narrative story belief. And this occurs also with our identity. So, like you said, am I this meat suit? Am I just an accumulation of experiences and interpretations and all that? It's like, where is the self in here? If the more we look, actually, the more we sit again in stillness and look for this identity, this ego, whatever you want to call it, the more we actually won't be able to find it. And so, again, emptiness is, in my
Oh, and that
opinion,
is good. Let me just stop you right there. We can't even find the ego. This raises such an important
mhm,
point here.
mhm,
The mind, the ego, is not real. It's a
mhm,
part of Maya or illusion anyway. And that's an
mhm.
important thing to explore. I want to go further into that
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the Hindus talk about Maya being the reality that we find ourselves in, which is illusion.
Mhm,
Shakespeare spoke about this being like a play where we're acting out in these costumes, playing out our parts.
mhm.
Others have pointed to the same phenomena. Even in more modern times, we talk about a simulation theory, that we're in some kind of a simulation. What's your thoughts on this Maya, this illusion?
Wow. Okay, where to start? So
Pretty deep, isn't it?
it is, it
Just
is.
go
It's like
straight in.
I'm always down for that. So, in my opinion, so what we could call illusion is this what appears to be here. And again, applying emptiness to that. What is actually real here beyond the mind? And you would say nothing. We are creating experience right here and now. The experience that there is a Ben, a solid Ben here, is a fabrication. And at a deeper level, so is the experience that there is no identity, there is no Ben here. That's also a fabrication. And no matter what you do, you can't escape the fabrications of mind. This is how it works, realizing that absolutely everything that can be, the notion that there is an ego and the notion that there is not an ego, both are fabricated at one level. And the mind is creating these stories again, and they manifest and experience as such. And I don't mean this manifestation in any sort of like kind of woo terms. It's just more like the story we're telling ourselves creates our experience as far as what I'm picking up through the five senses. Again, when I'm talking to Paul right here, then that's a certain flavor of experience. This is objectively happening. I could also see you as creation itself. Source itself is speaking through you to me. And then I'm picking up a very different experience through the senses. Who am I? I'm getting chills right now because, again, this is how we can start to work with our fabrications to create something that's much deeper, much more enchanted in a way, much more beautiful. And yeah, I guess realizing that it is all illusion, that it's all empty of inherent existence, it is what you make it. When we realize this, not just with the mind, but with the heart, with the body, when we start to be able to transform the world we're experiencing, that's when we gain a immense amount of dexterity and agency in our full creative potential. Because again, this is non-dual. God, self, separation. Could it be only where you make it? Could it only
Yeah,
be
that's
that we are?
incredible.
I know it's we
You know,
create our.
I love this concept, and you beat me to it, the
Yeah.
understanding of non-duality.
Mm,
I was asking this question, when I was meditating yesterday, I wanted to, I've heard the wave analogy before. Some people are familiar with the wave analogy, that we are like the waves in an ocean. And I wanted to get a better analogy of what dualism is, non-dualism rather is.
Mm,
And I
mm,
got this, right? What do you think of this? We are like instruments in a symphony. You might be a flute, I might be a violin. We have our own identity individually. You can play your instrument, make a great sound, I can do the same. But when we come together through
mm,
the orchestration of the symphony,
mm,
suddenly we lose not that we lose our individual identity,
mm,
we merge with a larger sound, a
mhm,
larger
mhm.
symphony, and then we accelerate our potential.
Yeah.
Now, this is a glimpse, even though it's like in Buddhism, you're saying you're pointing to the moon, but it's still not the moon, it's just pointing
Mhm,
towards it. But I think it helps the human mind say, okay, I have this form identity. I am having this experience, and I have these individual sounds that I play out. But when I come together with the greater whole of consciousness or awareness or whatever you call that,
mm, mm,
there is a harmony and a
mm.
completion to that. Does that
Yeah.
work for you as an analogy?
It does. Well, I like the whole, I'm a flute, you're a violin, and we come together to make something greater than the sum of our parts. And we also are playing off of each other. You know what I mean? The noise I make, the music I make is dependent on the music that you make.
Yeah.
And at a deeper level, there's such a deep ability to relax into non-duality, to let go, to realize this world and everyone in it is me, in a sense. It's just as me as this body is. When we realize that, we see ourselves in others. I see myself in you. I can see myself in the kids running around. I see myself in the trees. I see myself in the mountains and the stars. And at that point, what is something like death? When we see ourselves in everyone around us. When the way I put it, it's the same seer that has witnessed my life, my stories, my childhood, my upbringing, all of these things. The same seer has seen your life and
Mm,
your childhood and your conditions. Different conditions, same seer. And at that point, I am these kids running around. Yes, we're different, clearly, in one sense, but also that seer remains the same. And when we see this, when we know, when this becomes a gnosis, it's one thing to play with these ideas in the mind. It does have an impact, but it's a very different thing when it sinks and when it really changes the world that you're walking through, which is just a matter of practice. Because again,
yes.
we have a certain conditioned belief that everyone is believing this one narrative that, hey, we're all separate, we're all, locked in these solo experiences, and once this is gone, who knows, but that's it.
Mm,
That's a certain narrative. And that just because everyone believes it doesn't make it true. It just means that everyone believes it. And there's a way to embrace emptiness again, to realize there is no one story that's actually the way things are, and we can start to make it more beautiful, more liberating, where we see ourselves in others, for instance. I mean, that's for me, it's like obvious at this point. It's like, look how similar we look. I got two eyes, you got lips, you got two shoulders. Like, yo, we're basically the same. Like, you know what I mean?
well, you
Um,
scratch the surface of the skin, and any
yeah,
one will say that we're, regardless of what our skin color is, for
mhm,
this is cancels out racism right here. You go beneath rather the level of the skin, and we're all the same. We have the same organs, we have the same blood
yeah,
um, coursing through veins. We have arteries and veins and organs and bones, and we're pretty much the same on a physical level. When you
yeah.
talk about the witnessing presence or the awareness that is happening through you, that's happening through me. When we say it's the same awareness, help
Hmm.
people understand that, because I think the big fear from the ego is if I don't have an individual identity, then somehow I'll be lost in beyond the physical. So
Ooh, yeah.
I want to almost double down on this experience because
Yeah.
even though I'll be around, I won't be myself. Help
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
understand it, or at least remove that fear as it arises, because that's the thing the ego does. It
Yeah.
fears annihilation.
We are clinging to a sense of solidity and certainty. And a
Mm.
part of us already knows that this solidity and certainty is only a projection of mind. It is not actually here. It's an illusion, a fabrication. A part of us knows that. So we feel apprehensive when someone's about to bring it up and collapse the walls and approach emptiness, actually. And it reminds me of a quote by Tibetan teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the bad news is that we're all in free fall without a parachute. And the good news is that there is no ground.
Nah,
So again, we're all
right.
falling. There is no you, there is no world objectively here.
Mm.
But the good news is it's actually always been this way and there's nothing to hit. It's only what you make it. And it
Mm.
is only what you make. And that's a high risk, high reward kind of game. Because I think in today's world, there's a lot of people living in a self-constructed hell on earth. And it really manifests as such.
Do you
And
think
that's where
that is the hell that a
I,
lot of wisdom traditions have spoke about? I know in Christianity, I've studied this. It's probably
I,
more prominent in Christianity than some of the other religions, is this concept of hell.
yeah.
Jesus spoke about hell.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
came to understand when I researched that he was talking about a very literal place outside of the area in which he lived,
Interesting.
which was like a rubbish tip where there
Interesting.
was wailing and gnashing of teeth, as quoted in scripture. And it was
Hmm.
just a place of taking one's rubbish to be burnt. And there was a lot
Interesting.
of sickness
Huh.
and people scavenging around that. He was using parable and metaphor to try to help people that were relatively uneducated at the time. They didn't read or write, understand these spiritual concepts. Of course, through the ages, through dogma, through control structures, that has been largely taken out of context.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And I think again, it's such a powerful way to control the masses by saying, "Hey, do what I say, or else you're gonna burn for eternity." If you convince
What a
people of that,
greater fear,
a lot of
like, is
power.
there a
Yeah,
greater fear than to
right.
suffer eternally in
Right.
pain and suffering? I mean, talk about a control mechanism that works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's so dark and it's also so disconnected from what I would feel like is a direct experience of divinity, which,
Mm.
in my opinion, is rooted in spaciousness, openness, and love. All-encompassing love. It doesn't matter what you do. If you are here right now, you're deserving of heaven on earth. There is no judgment. There is no right or wrong other than the human mind's projection of such a thing. We are the creators of heaven and hell. We are our own judges. Could we be God incarnate, deciding our own fate right now? And I just got chills again because we are
Yeah.
what we say we are. And again,
Yeah, and I agree with this concept. Look, I was raised a conservative Christian, and having these types of conversations were blasphemous,
mhm,
and would
mhm,
still be if I was a part of those communities. Now, we know that, particularly in North America, these communities, particularly if you can get a child before the age of, I think it's 8 years old, to be hardwired into the brain some of these beliefs.
mm,
And as the brain is forming, it's very challenging to question that belief structure. This is why they like to really kind of indoctrinate children
Yeah.
into this way of
Yeah.
being, because they know that if you have that belief, you'll probably hold that belief for most of your
Mhm.
life.
Mhm. 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 Yeah. I mean, so again, that conditioning, which by nature is maybe contractive and fear-based. And for me, there's like the whole spiritual evolution, a big part of it has been listening to the messages held in the body. And when the body contracts in fear, that's a message. It really is. It's a message to become aware of something. And again, if it's all empty, there's a quote by one of the Buddha's disciples, Nagarjuna, which is that peace is the ultimate reality. Anything beyond that is a fabrication of mind. So when we feel fear, when we feel contraction, that's an indication that we are falling for a fabrication of our own mind. And if we can step out of that to get perspective on that, using the body as a compass to be like, hey, whatever feels right is a message from divinity. If God, divinity, source could speak to us, it might be through the body, be how we feel. When you feel good doing something, that's a message. Hey, keep doing that. If you feel bad doing something, if you steal or treat someone wrong, and you feel bad, that's a message. It's up to us to listen to that. And so again, if we have a certain narrative, a certain belief that is causing us an experience of suffering, recognizing again from the Buddhist framework, they're all empty of any inherent existence. If the body says, "Oh, I don't like that," if we listen to that, how do we interpret that contraction? In my experience, it's a message saying, hey, keep looking for other ways of seeing this. Keep looking for a different narrative, a different view, because the body doesn't like this. And source is saying, hey, please, let's try something else because this hurts. And so again, using the body as a compass to try on different perspective, different narratives, different ways of seeing yourself, the world, creation, spirituality, and feeling into it to feel what feels deep, resonant, meaningful, what connects you to things beyond yourself in a very just a healthy way. Because like let's just look at stress and how that impacts the body, how that impacts our lifespan. If I live in fear that I'm going to hell because I messed up once in my life, if that's, a certain narrative that somebody's living, your body is going to be stressed out and is going to impact your health in the present moment and is going to impact your longevity. So it's again, listen to the body, letting it be our antenna to source because it came from source and it's going to source. And actually, right now, it's deeply interconnected with source, inextricably linked to divinity right here and now. For me, it's, are we listening?
Yeah, incredible. I love that. So as we pivot then back into the conversation with technology, I understand we're probably in the next 5 years going to see more change as a society than we probably have ever in the history of humanity. This is happening for a number of reasons, but predominantly because actually, let's break this down. It's happening for two reasons. And I actually think the first reason is creating the second one.
Mm,
Many spiritual teachers, from Eckhart Tolle to some of the more ancient wisdom traditions, have spoken about this time in history where there would be a
mm,
evolutionary jump occur.
mm, mm,
Now, this was an evolutionary response to either survival or annihilation. Well, I mean, we were destroying the planet. We only have to look at the last century to see why we were doing that, particularly with development of certain weapons.
mm,
We tipped the scales, I believe, from the work of Dr. David Hawkins, who spoke about consciousness being rising on the planet, that not every human being had to evolve to a certain stage of its evolution, but we needed to reach a critical mass. So if you look at the work of someone like Eckhart Tolle, they talk about the new heaven and the new earth. We're shifted into this time where we've evolved as a species, right?
Mm,
Now, not
mm.
everybody, not every individual member has made that evolution. Some are further digressing into more negativity. We can see that. But there is a clear split that's occurring between those that are having a profound spiritual awakening, enlightenment like you have. And that's very obvious. I know everyone will agree with that. You can see
Oh,
that it's tangible.
thank you. Yeah.
To those that would view a video like this and go, huh? What are they talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is the thing that and what I think that this is, and this segues into AI, because we were ready for that, suddenly these things are being given to us because we're ready to handle them. And I think this has happened throughout human history, that it's a result of our consciousness rather than our consciousness responding to it.
Mm, mm,
And this
mm,
poses the question, are we ready to live with this technology and use it for the betterment of the planet? Or will we use it like a Terminator scenario or a Mad Max scenario and destroy ourselves? I'm
mm.
very optimistic about humanity's trajectory. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah. I mean, just to go back to your point of not everybody evolving consciously, spiritually in the same rate. And I think that's true. Obviously, there are different degrees of, the curriculum that each of us are in, and there's nothing wrong with any of it. We've all been at every level in one sense.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, and also I heard something somewhere that said there only has to be about 10% of a
Yes.
population to change into something that is clearly more advantageous in order for the whole collective to shift. So again, listening to what's coming through us, listening to, because for me, what's coming through me, I don't even know what to call it. I wouldn't even call it me sometimes. Like again, for me, it's more of a stepping out of the way. And all of a sudden this stuff starts to spew. And obviously, you know, this light comes through a prism that is this body, this mind. But
Is
at the same
using
time,
your
stepping out of the way.
vocabulary, it's using your vocal cords, it's
Right.
using your
Right.
particularly articulation, but it's a quality. I think I mentioned this to you before. There's a certain quality that arises from a particular consciousness, and
Mhm.
and for those that are familiar with it, will be
Mm.
aware of it.
Yeah. So I would say again that quality of just for me again like stepping out of the way is trust. It's faith in creation itself as well as you. We are a a necessary part of creation. We are creation. And do I trust myself? And if I say yes, then I trust what's coming through me. In action, in speech, and in mind. I know it all has a place. I know it's from source, and it's all an expression of God. It's all an expression of light. And do I trust that? Knowing that it can take on darker tones, it can take on something a little spooky, scary. Again, is that okay? Knowing that God is all of these flavors. And in the darkness, in the pain, in the trauma, even there are valuable and necessary lessons where I wouldn't be the person that I am if I didn't experience drastic darkness in my life. And I say thank you to all of that because it's made me who I am. Of course, when I'm in it, I say, fuck this. I'm done with it. But when I look back today, I see the value and actually the necessity of that pain, of that depression, of that trauma, of that dissociation, of that confusion and uncertainty. That's a necessary part of this play, of this curriculum. And when we see it like that, what is good and bad? Could bad just be a teacher teaching us how to open, teaching us how to release our idea of control into what's actually calling the shots? That's something so much beyond what we can comprehend. showing us the necessity of faith and of trust. And again, in the non-dual sense, remembering what we are and remembering what we're not. And remembering that sooner rather than later, this body's got to rot. This is a poem I just wrote like literally today,
Yeah,
actually. It's
I
such
love that.
interesting coincidence. And I'll just do the poem. So
Do the
remembering
poem.
what we
Yeah, I
are.
was to do the poem.
And so these are the times, right here and now, these are the times of remembrance where we collectively remember what we are and we remember what we are not. And we remember that sooner rather than later, this body has got to rot. And remembering that this has never actually, truly, in totality, been you. Because what you really are is written in the stars. We are this dream. And remember that not everything is as it seems. And I know that right now, reality appears to be busting at the seams. But this is all according to plan. This is a lesson teaching us how to let go into chaos and into flow, letting the pendulum swing to and fro, from lost to found and back to lost again, remembering the perfection in every breath and every step that we take along the way, remembering our place when the world is dark. We don't look down, we look within, to remember that place beyond sin, to remember what we are and to remember what we are not.
I
So I
love
just wrote
that.
that down. Oh yeah,
That's
thank
so
you. No, it's,
good. Wow, you're a poet as well, multi-talented.
oh, thank you. I just started writing stuff, but
This is
it's a
great.
good way to again channel this energy and like
Yeah.
let this light shine, to be
What
honest.
do you experience when you write something like that? How do you perceive that?
Ooh, wow. So when I write like that, it's like a part of me at first, like, oh, I would love to have it rhyme. But it's more just I want to let it flow. And it's like
Yes.
the words just pop in my head again. With me and poetry, it's really like grace. And it's like the more I try to make it rhyme or make it sound good or write something cool, the less that it happens.
The more you're
And
out
this
of the flow, right? Because this is about
right,
flowing and not using the mind. It raises another great question is like, where does this come from? Where does this quality come from?
mm,
Does it
mhm.
arise from the mind or is it behind the mind, beyond the mind? Does it come
It's
through you rather than from you?
oof, I just got chills. I mean,
Mm.
that's a hard question to answer. I would say again, when I'm really in flow like that, when it's just freely coming through me, I'm not thinking about it. It's somehow the words are just in my mouth and they somehow work. And it's again, I think there's something so deep in this as far as like whatever freestyling or spoken word poetry is a practice in stepping aside, getting out of our own way and seeing what happens. And interestingly, it's when I try to make things work that they fall apart most often. And when
Yes.
I just let them be, they flow on their own. This is like Taoism. This is being in line with the Tao. Just letting things go, remembering there is no doer. Nothing is done, but yet nothing is left undone. And at first the mind is like, what does that even mean? But it's like, again, don't try to do things. Know that there is no doer really. Just step aside, do what's here. You know, if the dishes are full in the sink, I'm gonna do those. You know, if you hit me up for a podcast, I'm gonna do that. But remembering there is no doer here. It's
And
all a
this is great because this brings up the question of the wit. Could you witness your life from a witnessing point of view? Yes, I'm witnessing myself having this podcast now because it's presented. But rather than trying to make stuff happen, or then the dishes are there to be done. Oh, I see that this has arisen in this moment. They need to be cleared.
Mhm.
There's a very different quality to that than to be trapped in the mind trying to do everything.
Yeah,
To meet a need as it arises as a witnessing consciousness,
totally.
than to
Totally.
be trying to make your life. Because regardless of what we think we're in control or not, this meat reality suit, whatever you want to call it, is not really in control. You might think you're in control.
Hmm.
And if you've got a big ego, you'll probably think you're even more in control. But what you observe is that you most of the time you're trying to manipulate circumstances,
Yeah.
people, and life to make it go your own way. That's
Mhm.
very different.
Yeah. So again, trying to manipulate life to make it what you think it should be. And this
Yes.
is at a very surface level of mind. And remember what we are. Again, are we just this mind and body? Or are we so much bigger than that? And do we have faith in the flow of this place, the flow of creation, to take me to where I need to be? Remembering that I can't hope to conceptualize the path of this life. Am I going to predict the future like that? Could I ever hope to try? There can be dramatic changes. There could be bombs dropping by the end of this year. There could be huge crises. There could be dramatic, miraculous, prophetic events this year that would drastically change the trajectory of my life. Why would I hope to try to control it?
Mm,
And in the letting go, we'll find a power beyond anything that we knew before. In this small sense, there's such a small sense of power. Let go and open to what comes to you and recognize the power in that flow. Again, this aligns with Taoism, which specifically emphasizes this flow as the focal point of that whole spiritual tradition is getting in line with the Tao. How do we actually let go? Because it's not as simple as it seems, actually.
yeah, and this is a profound thing that I've developed a whole method around is releasing and letting go
Mm,
of the
mm, mm.
versions, of the attachments, of the perspectives, of everything that we tend to cling to for a sense of control and identity.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
how can you let it go when you're worried about paying your rent and when you're worried about paying the bills because of inflationary events?
Hmm.
How do
Hmm.
you let go and trust a greater intelligence, a greater force that is greater than this analytical machine that we call the
Yeah.
mind?
Yeah, so I could answer that in two ways. One is I want to bring in a little bit of a meditative approach, which for me, relating to fear and what fear does to our experience of reality. So when we are in fear, fear is a primordial contractive force, and you'll notice when you're in fear, everything seems very real and solid. And my problems, when I'm afraid of them, are very contracted, dense, and they seem very solid and unchanging.
Mm,
Love, acceptance, openness, on the other hand, is the expansive primordial force. And if I can accept my life, I can accept that I gotta pay rent, I can accept that I'm not perfect. All of a sudden, these identities and these problems become much less dense, solid, and appear actually much less real. They're much more fluid. So this is again how the mind is constructing our experience to a degree. And one thing I could say for that to put into practice would be faith, acceptance, and trust. If we can apply that to our circumstances, apply that to the fact that, hey, maybe bombs have to fall. Remember what we are and remember to have faith in that. And what happens then to these problems, even apocalyptic level problems? If we have faith, they loosen, they become much less dense. We can start to find joy, peace, even in these extremely problematic events. And again, this is how the mind is constructing experience through something like fear versus love and acceptance. And it's again, so we are watering, we all have the seeds of fear, just like we all have the seeds of love, faith, and acceptance inside of us right now. And we can choose to water any seed that we like with our awareness. And if we focus on the fear, we are watering that seed. And if we focus on the love, focus on our knowing of faith, our trust, we're watering that seed. And no matter what, some tree is going to grow, and whatever seed we water more with our awareness and our attention will grow into a bigger part of our experience. So,
Mm,
again, this is a high risk, high reward kind of game. But again, we have agency to choose, becoming mindful. What am I focusing on right now? And do I want to continue to focus on that? There's no wrong answers, but just again, having the power and the freedom and the agency to choose for ourselves.
mm. Yeah, beautiful. What does faith mean to you?
Oh,
Define faith from your perspective.
that's like I mean, it's a trust. It's also
Yes.
letting go. And when I say letting go, it's hard to like define that term for me linguistically. It's more of like
Yeah.
a
Mm,
it's just a relaxation. I heard one teacher, Tibetan Buddhist teacher, Andrew Holacek, actually say the whole spiritual path could be summarized as just a progression into deeper and deeper states of relaxation and openness.
mm,
Learning how to relax and open to what life is giving us. How do
mm,
we open to this? How do we let go into what's given to us, recognizing that good, bad, painful, pleasant, it all is perfect. It all has a place. It all has a necessary place by design. And if we recognize this, when the pain comes, when it really hurts, can we say thank you? I can't see it right now. I can't see it with my eyes right now, but I know this is happening for my best good. This is happening so that I can become the person you need me to be. Thank you. Thank you for this pain. And if we have that relationship to the pain, it actually changes how it manifests an experience. We'll find that our resistance to pain amplifies it. A Zen teacher, Shinzen Young, say, yeah, I think you reposted this today, but he says that our experience of suffering is equivalent to pain multiplied by our resistance to that pain.
yeah.
So, pain is a part of life that's going to happen. It's part of the duality. And if we choose to say, this is not okay, this is not allowed, I don't like this, I'm going to numb, look the other way, run away, we're actually amplifying our experience of suffering. And if instead we look this pain in the eyes, like an ice bath, you just sit with it, you know? You look it in the eyes, you recognize, hey, there's a purpose for this. Whether it's a breakup, or you lose your job, or you break a bone, what is the message that is given to me right now? What can I extract from this? What do I need to see? I say a prayer sometimes that is, show me what I need to see and let me feel what I need to so that I can be in service to you, to us, because that's all that I want, actually. If I have to hurt, bring it, please. Give it to me. Show me what I need to see so that I can really be of service. And again, looking back on my life and all the pain, I see how I was given quite a bit. Again, you posted something that was along the lines of God tests the strong. We'll be given these tests to refine us, to give us the strength, give us the ability, give us the skill to navigate that darkness, navigate that adversity. Because if we didn't experience it, how would we know how to navigate it? And from this place and these skills, we get to serve as, I mean, the word that's coming is angels. We get to outstretch our hand and say, hey, I've been through that darkness. I've been through the anxiety, the depression, the dissociation, the crippling fear of the future. I've been there.
Mm,
And I'm going to show you how I got out of it. And thank God there are those people, because in these times today, we all know that that's becoming a bigger and bigger theme, is this crippling fear. And I feel blessed to be
mm,
in the position. I'm sure you feel the same,
mm,
to be in this position of at least somewhat just power to help people.
mm,
Because I see, again, in a non-dual sense, I
mm,
see that pain and I know that it's me. It's not even a knowing, it's a feeling. When
mm,
I see people in pain, I feel that. And I'm like, what can I do to help? And this has been my question in my life. What can I do to help? Because I know that that's me. And then what do you do? It's an open question. And I'm just learning how to optimally serve, again, us. I'm optimally serve you, optimally serve me, us. That's a life worth living for me. And again, it's such a blessing to have navigated all of that darkness. And again, it's a different relationship than the conditioned, hedonistic view, which is maximize pleasure, minimize pain. It's
And I
a,
think
again,
that is so important to have voices like yours and mine on social media coming through people's feeds because more than ever, people are addicted to, well, not only social media, but they're addicted to this illusionary cycle that we just endlessly scroll now, through our phones.
yeah,
To have your voice come up on their feed is great. As it happened
yeah,
with mine, your voice just popped up, and I
mhm,
immediately recognized the quality of what was coming through, and that's why I reached out to you. But I
mhm,
think it's so important because I think particularly younger people are struggling. Drug
yeah.
addiction, I'm seeing increase. What would you say to someone that's in the midst of an addiction, or maybe someone is even been
Yeah.
referred to this that's going through a really challenging thing like addiction? And
Yeah.
it might be substance, or it
Yeah.
could be addiction to negativity or just social
Yeah.
media.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting you say that actually. So I'm in my last year of grad school and I just got an internship at an addiction rehab center. So
Ah, incredible.
yeah, working with addiction firsthand. And I mean, it's complex and it's very somatic, these addictions, it's kind of like our hardwiring is to, well, let's put it this way, addiction arises for what reason? Usually because we have to avoid something. We're using something as a crutch, or maybe we're using it as a veil from seeing something that we need to see. And again, maybe that's painful. Maybe I'm seeing that, oh, I don't like my life the way that it is. I don't like my relationship. I don't like my job. And instead, I drink, for instance. Or again, I fall into negativity because that's what's familiar. That's what feels safe.
It's
And
numbing
again,
those thoughts, isn't it? It's numbing rather than we spoke about letting go before, rather than letting go of those emotions, we avoid those emotions and we avoid them through perhaps drugs or alcohol or even psychedelics. People in the
yeah,
spiritual
yep,
community might be using that. I know some people that have had hundreds of ceremonies and they're addicted to the process because of the
yeah,
way it makes them feel. They don't have to
right,
necessarily release all of these
yeah.
energies.
And again, I think it comes down to our baseline experience. When I'm dead ass sober and when nothing's going on, am I okay? It's an open question. Am I okay the way that I am? Is this okay? Is this world, is this life okay the way that it is? And if we are constantly trying to change it, change ourselves, change the world, make it something other than what it is, then it's painful. And that's, again, it's not a bad view to constantly try to improve ourselves. I do that regularly. And to try to improve the world, for instance, that's not a bad way
Yeah,
to
and
see.
let's look at that for a moment because I think that's important. You obviously, like I do, you go to the gym, you look after the body you have been given or the experience you're having.
Mhm.
How do we navigate that in a positive way? Because a lot of people say, well, it's all right for you. You've got, you're healthy, you're young. Of course, it's a
Yeah.
lot easier for you, and maybe someone that's listening to this has an older body that's unwell, for example.
Mhm.
That's a part of that we get caught into. How do we navigate this in a healthy way? Like you look after your body, you go to the gym, you obviously are working on goals and aspirations physically. How do
Mhm.
you do it in a conscious way?
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's a balance between trying to improve myself in every domain, obviously, improve my life, improve the world, and also realizing, paradoxically, that you and this world could actually never be any better than it is right now at the deepest level. It's a paradox, and the logical mind will say, well, which one is it? And that's where we have to move beyond the logical mind, actually, and move into the realm of paradox. And this is where there's a lot of deep truth in this paradox of recognizing that there's different ways to view things at different times. And again, they are all empty of inherent existence. There is no one way that's objectively the right way. We can try on different views. The view that I want to optimize my experience and work, 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 see what I can be in this life, see what I can do, see what I can give. Beautiful. But if we're trapped in that, we will spread ourselves too thin and we will burn out. And we'll realize there's no end to how much I can improve myself, how much I can give. There's no actual limit. And that's a scary realization. And then do we have access to a, again, paradoxically polar opposite view, which is that right here, right now, is as good as it gets. This is it, actually, right now. Myself, the world, this moment, this is it. How do you feel about that? And then, like, again, asking that question, is this enough? And opening that dialogue, is it? Is it enough? And if not, why? And can we sink deeper and deeper into this knowing of perfection, of divinity, of faith, of trust into right here, right now? Not again, and if we fall too far into that camp, it can turn into complacency. And I see this in the spiritual community a lot. People are like, oh, it's all perfect, so I don't have to work. I don't have to go for what I want. I don't have to work out, take care of my body, eat right, because it's all perfect. And that seems like an incomplete
Yeah,
perspective
and
in
that
my
can be a very real issue that people face. I even see that as as an issue that is going to be more widely challenging for people with the advent of AI, because what people will say is, I don't need to work in the way I used to, because
yeah.
I have access to technology that will do it for me. I mean, I don't know if you're using any forms of AI at the moment, but I certainly have integrated them into my workflow and are finding that I am spending less time on the arduous tasks of writing because I can get it done quicker. Now, as I watch and observe my time being freed up through that process, I could go, oh, this is a negative. However, the way I'm seeing it is it gives me more of an opportunity to focus on my humanity, which
Yeah.
is conversation, connection. If this is happening more and more for us, maybe there will be a emphasis rather
Mhm.
than from working and having to work because that's what we always have done, to saying we now have time to build communities. We have time to connect. We have more time to have conversations like this and
Yeah.
listen to them because we're not so busy.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think again, it's the unknown. So again, when the
And
human
these are
mind
the
and
opportunities that present themselves, right? Because I know that's the first thing that people ask around AI is, if we don't have the same sense of purpose, and they're often referring to a job, but
Mhm.
are we so much more than what we just do? That generally, when someone is in a job, there is an underlying emotional response to fear that is going on. I need to feed my children, therefore I'm working in this job that I don't really like so
Mhm.
that I can pay the bills, so that they can be provided for. You remove that really low energy and you put someone into a position that's a more creative one, that they have the means to explore their creative side. They have the
Yeah.
means to have great conversations like we're having right now, and then watch where that moves them into.
Again, it's just the unknown. Like
So it's an
again,
opportunity.
Exactly. For me, it's like when I get habituated to working all the time and filling my days with, oh, workout, meditate, go do this, go do that. When I have a block of 2 hours when I'm not doing anything, I'm sort of like, what do I do? And again, at first, there's like that resistance, like, oh, I should probably fill it with something. But what happens if we just sit in it? And it's interesting for me when I've had this space in my life, that's when I find new hobbies. I start playing the guitar, I start writing poems, and again, just out of the blue.
Mm.
But I think anyone needs that space, that freedom, that it's spaciousness, and also like a letting go into the void so that we see what comes, what arises from that void. And again, you might be surprised at the beauty that arises from that. But again, it's the unknown right now, so we have that apprehension. But again, it's redefining who am I? Because I think a lot of people are stuck in identifying with their vocation. And again, there's nothing wrong, nothing right or wrong with that. It's just like a product of the times that we're living in and coming out of. And we get to redefine who am I beyond my vocation? What is a good life when I don't have to work 40, 60 hours a week to provide for my family? What is a good life? What is my connection to something like divinity? And how deep can I make that relationship given the time? Is there an end to the depth of beauty I can experience? And I'm getting chills because I know
Mm.
that there is none.
Yeah.
That's what we get to step into, is embracing the unknown, seeing what arises from it, embracing the depths of the mind and the depths of our creative potential with this mind and what we can quite literally do with it, manifest into experience when we have that freedom, when we have that space. So, like you said, I'm really excited for it. I think that there will be, again, a learning curve and it'll be difficult. But again, like anything else in life, that difficulty is essential. That's how you grow. That's how we learn at the individual level and at the societal level. So, it's going to be hard and that's how it's got to be. And I have faith that it'll all turn out according to plan.
And
And
these are why these conversations are important because a lot of people are asking these questions, particularly right now. One thing I see arising is, and I don't even want to give it a label because then we limit it. If we call it broadly spirituality or an
Mhm.
understanding of our intrinsic nature, I see that becoming more and more mainstream, even as AI plays a greater role in our lives because people are free to explore and ask those questions. Perhaps they didn't have them before. And I want to ask your view on this. Do you see, with all of the information that will be available so readily and is already available to us, that these older, more dogmatic structures, like organized religion, will not expand but will diminish? And obviously, that process has been happening over the last couple of hundred years anyway, between the separation between state and religion. Do you see that either evolving, and I'm talking probably more towards the three sort of major religions that no, I'm moving away from probably Buddhism and Hinduism when I'm
major Western religions.
yeah, perfectly, yeah, the Western religions. Do you sort of see a diminishment happening, at least in the way that they've been organized in the past?
So I like the word dogmatic religion because again, what is dogma? It's this idea that this is objectively the way things are for everybody. And that is a limited, contracted view
Mm.
in my experience. Again, it's just limited. When again, if we apply emptiness, and again, this is a Buddhist teaching that is based off of insight through meditation. You just see how things are, and you'll see that it is what you make it. And for me, I love the Western religious traditions. I think they're beautiful, but
Mm.
I don't see them as dogma. I don't see them as objectively the way that things are for everybody. I see them as poetic expressions of the ineffable, actually, of that which it can never actually be defined. It is a beautiful, poetic narrative that we get to try on and trying on. Christianity and as all its different flavors, Cabal and Judaism, Islam,
Mm,
Hinduism, Shiva Shakti and the pantheon of gods in the Hindu religion. Just
mm,
feeling these stories, these myths, this poetry, trying it on through your perception, how does it feel? And wrecking, like it hits like a poem hits
mm,
deep in your soul, and it changes the world that we experience. If we apply it like that, when we speak to gods, when we pray to gods, we construct them in a sense. And it's beautiful to have
mm.
that ability.
And
And
that
for
can
me,
be wonderful
yeah,
for the human mind, right? We were talking about non-duality before. That can be at someone's level of consciousness to have a deity outside of themselves. It not necessarily bad, but it perhaps points to a stage of one's evolution as you evolve your consciousness and understand the symphony, the interconnectedness, the individuality, but it also adds to the totality
yeah,
of
yeah.
all. It isn't a diminishment, but it's an expansion. You used that word before beautifully. It's an
Mhm.
expansion of consciousness. It's an expansion of creation
Yeah.
rather than
And
a diminishment of one.
it's expanding to a wider lens, a deeper sense of freedom and agency, and a deeper embodiment of our full creative potential to recognize how we are creating experience at the level of even religion and worldview. This is creation, and we get to again feel into the body. Maybe use the body as a compass to what feels right. Maybe it is Kabbalah, maybe it's Christianity, maybe it's Buddhism, Hinduism. There is no right or wrong. But I will warn against falling for the dogma. Because what is that? When we say this is objectively the way things are, we are contracting into a solidified narrative where this is objectively true, just like our ego, our sense of self, how that contracts into something seemingly so solid through fear. If we just have love, trust, acceptance, we loosen these narratives. If I'm not scared of a God that's going to punish me, if I'm not scared of fucking up, if I'm not scared of not finding enlightenment, if I just let it go, what
Yeah.
happens? We'll
Yeah.
find that we're deeply free. And that's what I want to bring is again that deep level of agency and freedom that we all have, except when we're fabricating an illusion of something that is more contracted. And because then we have that. And it's like, there's no right or wrong. It's just like, I hate to see people suffering from their own fabrications, their own projections of mind that they take to be real.
Mm,
And like, I project this illusion of a God that is going to punish me if whatever, if I don't go to church on Sunday and give alms or whatever.
mm.
And I'm punished by a God I created. And again, that's my perspective
Yes, yes.
from
Well,
a
that's a
certain
great
view.
thing. This God that we have subscribed to, I would argue, has not been created. We're not being created in its image. We created it in our image. And of course it was going to be a man, right? Of course it was. And if I always think that if God was going to have a gender, and of course God doesn't, that's the
Mhm,
physical,
mhm,
he would be probably a woman because she's more of the creative force.
mhm, mhm.
She gives
Yeah,
birth.
totally. And
Do
that's
you
the thing.
find, let me ask you this question as segue into this. How do you feel in being in a male body? How do you feel about women being in power? Imagine
Like
had could likely happen.
politically
Female
or like,
American president. But how do you
yeah.
feel like that as being in a male body?
Huh. Um, Honestly, I feel fine about it. It's not something that's really crossed my mind. I think everybody should be in their power. I do think my notion about women not being in power is a product of the globalized patriarchy, actually. And
Yeah.
when I say that, what I mean is when a woman is really in her power, and that includes sexual desire, which is probably the most powerful urge that we have, one of them.
Mm.
When a woman's really in her full expression, owning her power, a man realizes we can't control that. And thus we try to make them small. We try to take away their rights. We use our size to belittle them and keep them down because we're scared of a woman really in her power. And I think, again, that's coming from a very contracted, fear-based experience. Because if we just let women be in their power, just like we let men be in their power, we might find that things balance a little bit more. Because
Yes.
again, this world that we're living in is run by basically white guys, old white guys. And
Old white
that's
guys, right? With a lot of
right,
money.
exactly. And that's a certain perspective. And there's like, not that there's anything wrong with old white dudes objectively, but again, it's not balanced. It's not balanced with the
Yes.
feminine. And the
And it's an
feminine is
energy,
essential.
right? It's an energy that's been lacking in this, let's say, Piscean age, which was all about hierarchy, top-down control, always males at the top. Very
Mhm.
seldomly did you have a female at the top. And because females, and we're not trying to divide people by the sexes, by the way, this is pointing more towards the energy.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this has been a very masculine energy of control. And this is
Mhm.
more about a feminine energy of nurturing and birthing and
Mhm.
creation and allowing. And that is
Yeah. Yeah.
why, rather than getting divided, we had the feminist movement, was an arising of this consciousness. More, I saw the energy behind it. It was more about something that had been silenced, was given a voice. And this is the
Yeah.
arising, and many people talk about the age of Aquarius being the reemergence of the divine feminine.
Yeah. Yeah, and with that, I mean, it might be scary at first because the masculine is that direction and that control. We
Yeah.
like to know what's going on. You know what I mean? We like to make meaning, all of that. The feminine is much more chaotic and unpredictable. And in that, there is a letting go, actually. There's a release.
Mm.
There's an opening to, again, I'm getting chills, to things beyond ourselves, realizing I can't control it all. Let her rip. And again, in that, what comes? Maybe insights, knowing, maybe miracles. What happens when we're not contracting in many different ways in the body, in the mind, and how that manifests in what we take to be this material world. Maybe more miraculous events, walk on water type events, will be able to occur through opening, releasing into the chaos of that which is beyond our control and that which we cannot hope to understand. And
Mm.
again, I think it's a beautiful thing, but I think it's scary. Again, we're coming from, you know, thousands of years of this certain paradigm, basically, almost globally in most cultures. Yeah, there's very few like matriarchal cultures. It's basically patriarchy in this day and age. And we're going to enter something that is very different, and that is the unknown. And again, it brings us full circle to what's our relationship to something that is much different than what we're used to? Can we allow it to flow that way? And again, for me, it's just remembering what we are. Remember, you are all of it. Let
Mm.
go into it. If, again, for me, coming back to even if we have to die, if the bombs have to drop, if death occurs for this form right here, remember what we are. Because in a non-dual sense, I'm the one that dropped the bomb. I am the kids, I'm the trees, I'm the stars.
Mm.
And at that and in that sense, who cares really what happens to this body? I took this body because I am so much bigger than this. And if what I am wants to take this form, great. Take me anytime. I literally, and I'm not afraid because again, recognition of what we are. Take me anytime. Whenever my, mission has been fulfilled, great.
Mm.
Scrap it. Let's do something new. And again, at that, when we are embodying that, what happens to fear? And how does that relate to letting go?
Mm.
If we can open to the unknown, remembering what we are, helping us to loosen, relax, and open to what is coming, then we're not afraid. And from that too, we're gonna be in the best position to respond optimally to the circumstances that are gonna come our way. Because if we're scared, that's when you lock up and you don't know what to do and you push the nuke button because you're all terrified. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's from this place of openness, of acceptance, where we might find the metaphorical hidden path.
Yeah, I love that. What a great place to finish.
Mm.
I can't wait to do this again. I think this is just the
Likewise.
beginning of a great conversation. And I invite everyone to engage with this, comment, let us know your perspective, any questions that you may have, or anything you want us to cover, let us know in the
Yeah,
comments.
yeah,
And of
that would be
course,
awesome.
you can have a one-on-one session with Benjamin. I know your links are on your Instagram, right? What's your Instagram handle, by the way?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Duff Daddy 100. I got that name from a
Yeah, I was
wrestling
going to
coach.
ask you, where did you get that name from?
Yeah, no, my wrestling coach gave it to me.
Oh,
So,
your
and it
wrestling coach.
stuck. Yeah, so
I like
Duff
it.
Daddy. So
It's certainly memorable. There we go.
it is. It is. I didn't think I would be doing this content when I made it, but I think it kind of fits. So Duff
Yeah,
Daddy 100. I just started doing one-on-one sessions. If you want to talk or anything, or if you just want to DM me, I am all ears. If you have
great.
questions, I'd love to talk
How do
about
your
this.
sessions work? If someone comes to you and wants a session, how would you work with an individual?
Yeah, well, I mean, it really depends on the goal of the client. If they want to talk about something, maybe something tight, something that is quote unquote traumatic, then I would work with that from a certain lens. For me, it's getting people again to embrace a view that leads to relaxation and openness
Mm.
to life as it happens, and then seeing what comes out of that. So it's really open. It's kind of like a more meditative lens of just seeing what's in front of me
Love it.
and responding, you know, in a
Love it.
sort of Taoist, letting go kind of way. So, yeah, the sessions are really open. It really depends on what the person wants, what they're bringing to the session, and yeah, that's basically the place to start.
Amazing. Oh, amazing. Well, I encourage people to have a session with you. I think you've got a lot to offer, and I think it would be incredible